Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 18th of October 2021. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So, Valve made some moves, I guess, over the weekend, or made some news, I should say, over the weekend, as they banned blockchain games from their platform, and NFTs as well, from the Steam platform here. Now, in return, Epic, another kind of big games company, said that they would be, trying to make it work, or at least supporting it on their games platform called the Epic Games Store. Just generally, this is a really kind of, I guess, disappointing kind of move from Valve. I've been a big gamer for most of my life. I'm a very big Valve fan. Half-Life 2 is my favorite game of all time. So to see them do this is just very disappointing. Like I've been a huge kind of like Steam user, Steam supporter for quite a while, and supported a lot of the things that Valve have done through the years. But obviously, I don't support this. And I think it's because that the fact that there's like in-game items that can be kind of like bought and sold, and I don't think Valve would be able to kind of, I guess, take a cut from it, right, at the end of the day, but definitely a very kind of like disappointing move from them. And I don't think they've kind of like responded to any comments to any of the press that have asked like why they did this. But I would assume that it's definitely got to do with the monetization monetization aspect of it. Just sort of like what Apple did when they kind of like banned Web3 browsers from the app stores because of the in-app purchases, where it would bypass Apple's kind of like 30% revenue take. And it's funny because like Apple and Epic Games have actually been in a court battle over this for, I guess, it's been a while now. I think it's like the last year at least or something like that. So yeah, I mean, this just again shows you how these centralized tech platforms will obviously use their power to squash things that they don't want to see. But I mean, blockchain games and NFTs are inevitable. Look at Axie Infinity. Look how big that game is, how much revenue it's generating, and it is not on Steam. It's not on kind of like any of those kind of big platforms. It is on the App Store, of course, and things like that. But it didn't need Steam, or it didn't need like Epic Games. It didn't need kind of like these massive game publishers to support them. Now it's nice to see Epic kind of like coming and saying, we're going to support this even if Valve doesn't. But at the same time, I feel like they're just doing it because Valve isn't doing it. Because there was a comment from Epic Games' I guess founder, I think his name's Tom Sweeney or something like that. There was a comment from him a few months ago, or I think it was more recent than a few months ago, where he basically said that he thought NFTs were kind of like scams, essentially, or at least like mixed up with a lot of scams. Now, I feel like Epic is just doing this because Steam is going the other way. Like I would love to have seen, what Epic's stance would have been if Valve basically gave blessing to blockchain games and NFTs. Would Epic have gone the other way and said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna kind of like ban it"? But I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating and none of that would have happened, but still very, very disappointing to see. And I'm sure you've seen all the takes from different people on Twitter. I think it's generally kind of like the same stuff that I'm seeing, where it's just like, well, we don't need you, Valve. You need blockchain games more than, blockchain games need you. And I think it's true. At the end of the day, if a game's good enough and if it's providing like real value to people, they're going to play it regardless of what platform it's on. Like I don't choose not to play games just because they're not on Steam or not on the Epic Games Store. Obviously, it's really great discoverability mechanisms for people, and it's helped a lot of kind of, I guess, indie publishers get their games in front of people's eyes. And, a lot of blockchain games these days are just from indie publishers. So, I mean, that might be a little bit of a blow there, but the long term, I don't know. I see these kind of like being a blow to Valve more than blockchain games in general. But, yeah, so just a bit of color on that one. We'll see if anything changes over the coming months. Maybe Valve kind of like reverses their stance here as kind of, I guess, reaction to Epic Games basically saying they're going to support blockchain games and NFTs. But interesting to see more of this stuff just get into the mainstream spotlight as well. All right, so another All Core Devs call wrapped up on Friday, and as usual, Tim Beiko has a recap thread here. Most of the discussion, I think, was centered around the merge, of course, because of the interoperability week, and also because of the fact that there's a lot of kind of like core devs working on the merge now on the ETH1 side as well. This is the ETH1 kind of like core devs call, by the way, not like the ETH2 one. But I guess like those two things are basically becoming the same thing now, right? As we get through the merge. And there was a bit of discussion about like the difficulty bomb. That's set to go off in December, unless we kind of like push it back, and it's been agreed upon that it'll be pushed back to June. That doesn't mean that June is going to be the merge kind of like release date, but there was a bit of comments around this as well. where Tim basically said, I think he said like the team, once the kind of like code is done, they would want 4 months before, I guess like putting it to mainnet or something like that. I'm trying to find the comments here. I can't remember exactly what the wording was. Where is it? Okay, here we go. So Tim said this was about the difficulty bomb, and then Tim goes on to say, everyone agrees having a safe, well-tested merge is the most important thing by far, and we're okay pushing the bomb back twice if that is required. So the bomb will be pushed back to June, and then it'll be pushed back again if needed, if the merge isn't ready by June. And then he goes on to say that we being the core devs, think 4 months is a generous time frame from having the code done to seeing the merge on mainnet. Okay, so yeah, I was right. Like, if, for example, the code is done by February, the kind of like, I guess, shipping to mainnet would happen June 2022, which is, I mean, early Q2, right? Like I did say that late Q1, early Q2, expect the merge on mainnet. That's my speculation. It's not an official date. Don't take this as an official date either. There's still a lot of work to do and a lot of kind of like unknowns as well. But at the same time, very, very optimistic about that kind of like timeline there. And it wasn't just this that I kind of grabbed that timeline from. There was a blog post published by Tim Beiko about Amphora, which is kind of like the merge milestone that I went over last week, where everyone was kind of like clapping in that room, and you saw the pictures on Twitter and stuff like that. And in this blog post, I suggest reading it, but in this blog post was also a kind of graphic here titled The Path to the Merge, where it splits off the on-chain kind of like happenings and the off-chain happenings. So you can see here that it's got like what happened in the past, and my camera's cutting off at the very beginning, but basically Q4 2020 was the deposit contract was deployed in October, then the beacon chain launched on December 1st. And then we had both chains running in parallel. And we still have both chains running in parallel, the ETH1 and the ETH2 chains, or the execution and consensus layers running in parallel there. And then April 2021, we had the Berlin upgrade. August, we had the London upgrade. October, we had Altair Activate, which is the ETH2 upgrade. And then off-chain during that same period, we had the May 2021 was the Rayonism prototype, post-merge proof-of-stake devnet. So this was something I spoke about back in May around the merge. October, I guess like the week just passed, we had the Amphora multi-client interop with the transition done. And then Q4 2021 to Q1 2022, it's expected that devnets will go live. And I mean, there already is a devnet live, Pythos or Pithos. And there'll be public networks with hardened specs for the community to test. Now, what's the most interesting is the bottom right here, where it says 2022, the merge, proof of stake replaces proof of work. Now, this is strategically positioned right in the middle of Q1 2022 and Q2 2022, right? Like, so late Q1, early Q2. So this is kind of one of the reasons I'm basing my prediction on this. One of the reasons I've given that prediction myself, because I'm just basing it on the information that's fully publicly available. I have no insider information here. I don't talk to the devs like directly and say, hey, give me some insider information on the merge. No, at all. I'm just looking at this public data and kind of looking at all the public comments being made and construing it from there. But again, I mean, in Ethereum, it's kind of like this classic thing where we definitely do tend to underestimate the issues that we may run into and how long it will actually take to get to mainnet. So, I mean, I'm optimistic about a late Q1, early Q2 kind of merge on mainnet here. But at the same time, I would not be surprised at all to see it go live in Q3. I would be a bit surprised about Q4 because it feels like something would have had to go catastrophically wrong, or something bad would have really had to happen for a kind of like a delay like that. But again, it's not really a delay because there's no concrete dates given. These are estimated dates. Even the date on this chart, it's like totally estimated. We just don't know. It's too early to tell just yet. But as we get the clients building out everything for mainnet ready kind of clients, and we kind of like get these test nets all ironed out and these dev nets all ironed out, we'll have a much clearer picture. So I would say that by Jan-Feb, we should have a clearer picture about when it's going to go to mainnet, at least a much clearer window. So we can probably say like within a month of a window there. But there's no kind of like date going to be given until that's ready, which is fine. I mean, as I mentioned plenty of times on the Refuel, on Twitter, on the newsletter, the merge is the biggest upgrade to the Ethereum network ever. It is the most kind of like risky upgrade. It is the one with the most at stake. We need to get it right the first time. I've explained before what happens if we don't get it right. I've explained how difficult it would be to kind of like, I guess, roll back to proof of work. So we want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure the network does a safe transition as well, not just that it works, that it works safely. And we want to make sure that everyone is happy once it's once it's done. And also, what's critically important is that we want to make sure that end users don't even have to worry about it, which if it goes right, they shouldn't, because everything will just update as normal, as a normal kind of hard fork, because really the merge is just hot swapping proof of work out for proof of stake, and end users aren't going to notice that. The one thing end users will notice, maybe if they're paying closer attention, is the layer 1 block times kind of change. Right now they're at like 13, 14 seconds. I don't think I've seen a 14-second block in a while. It's been around 13 seconds. In proof of stake, that is kind of like a 12-second thing. From memory, I'm pretty sure it's a 12-second block, so maybe even 6 seconds. I mean, I can't remember because the spec actually changed at one point. It's either 6 or 12. I'd have to double check on that, but essentially, if it's 12, I mean, that's a very negligible change. And if it's 6, well, I mean, that's basically half, and users will feel that. But at the same time, I think most users don't pay attention to that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, like, you could do a transaction at kind of like second 10, and then the block gets mined at second 13, and your transaction technically happened within 3 seconds, right? Otherwise, you can basically do a transaction at second 1 and then have to wait a full block to get your transaction in. So I don't know how many people pay attention to that. I feel like people just submit their transactions, wait a little bit. Maybe you'll just watch it on Etherscan, and then it goes through, and they're all kind of like, well and dandy. They don't actually take a look at how long that block took to mine. I don't think people care at that point. And as more and more people move to layer 2s, which I expect by the time the merge happens, much more end users to be at layer 2 than at layer 1, it's just going to be such a smooth transition. I just really don't think most end users are even going to care or realize what's happened, which is good. It's a good thing that these, as I've said before, Ethereum is a protocol. It is not something that most people should have to even think about. They will get an experience on Ethereum through various kind of like front ends and layer 2s and all that sort of stuff. And the people who actually care and want to be involved in the stewarding of the network will be the ones worrying about these sorts of things. So yeah, but I really like this little kind of like graphic here. But yeah, I'm kind of like optimistic about early Q2 the most. I think Q1 at this point, from what I'm seeing, just the feeling that I'm seeing, I think Q1 is probably a very optimistic scenario. It would basically require like everything to go right, and from here with building the clients, it would require like no delays in building the clients. It would require no kind of like bugs or kind of things being found, like everything to run super smoothly. Not saying it can't happen, but the chances of it happening are a lot lower than higher there. So I would put early Q2 as my merge mainnet estimate, but don't quote me on that, and do not attribute that to the core developers. This is me, my personal opinion. This has nothing to do with the core developers or anyone kind of involved with core development. This is just me trying to keep you guys as up to speed with the merge as possible, because I know that you're very interested in it, and I know that it is obviously the next major upgrade for Ethereum. So a lot of people holding and buying ETH and stuff like that are also very interested in it. So I totally get that. All right, so speaking of the merge, I put out this tweet today where I said, post-merge, all unburnt fee revenue will go to ETH stakers. This is estimated to put staking yields at 10% or more based on current staked ETH amount, which is around 8 million ETH currently staked. Then you can throw in an issuance reduction of 90%, the triple halvening, plus the continuous V burning, which makes ETH deflationary. And I went on to say ETH is stupidly undervalued. I mean, you guys know that I think ETH is stupidly undervalued. I don't have to explain that as much. But what I did want to focus on is that, again, I think people are underestimating how good the ETH-denominated yield is going to be in staking once we have not only the block rewards, which at current staked ETH amount is 5.4%, kind of like APR there, but then you chuck in the unburnt fee revenue, puts it at 10% plus. Then you also chuck in MEV, which could very well get us to 15 to 20% at current staked ETH amount. Now, of course, if people see 15 to 20% essentially risk-free yield, I mean, it's still some risk, but like essentially risk-free yield on their ETH, they're going to take it. So that's going to end up with causing a lot of more ETH to be staked. And yes, yields will come down because of that, but logically, that ETH is being removed from the active supply, so the price should trend up because of that over the longer term. So we could get to a point where, I don't know, 30 million ETH is staked or something like that. I don't know what the yield would be around that. Maybe the yield will drop back down to 5% on the kind of like staking yield here, which is still amazing. 5% on ETH, which is an appreciating asset, or an asset that people expect to appreciate greatly over time. Like if ETH actually does go to $100,000, like I think it will, earning 5% from today on your ETH stake, that's going to add up over time, right? And that, that just obviously sits there and kind of it grows over time as you stake. So from that point of view, it's like a balancing act where the higher the yields, the more ETH that's going to get staked, and then if people decide to remove their stake, the yields get higher for everyone else, and then if people decide to put their stake in, well, the yields get lower, but the price logically should go up because of the fact that there's less ETH in circulation, less ETH to buy. And we have so much demand. Like, it's obviously not just the scarcity aspect to it. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea whenever I talk about the ETH scarcity engines, because ETH has an incredible demand side, as as we've seen from like the fee revenue, as we've seen. I think I've got a tweet about the fee revenue here. Yeah. I mean, the fee revenue here is the demand side, right? Generating $1 billion of fee revenue over the last 30 days, of which 82.45% was burnt. That is incredible demand for ETH as an asset just to pay fees. This isn't including the demand for ETH as a staking asset, the demand for ETH as money, NFTs and stuff like that, to use ETH as DeFi collateral, to use ETH as a store of value, to just stack ETH for institutions to buy ETH for their clients. All these sorts of things. ETH has just as much demand drivers as it has scarcity drivers. So those things together are going to create just such an awesome kind of like relationship for ETH within the network and kind of like within its value as well. And I expanded on this in today's Daily Gwei newsletter, but basically some people will hit back sometimes and kind of like say to me, this is super bearish that the fees are really high. I mean, this isn't something, this is actually the common kind of like thing that people think. It's like, well, the fees are really high on Ethereum, kind of like layer one. This is bearish. And I don't get that, because if you annualize this fee revenue right now, Ethereum is generating $12 billion of fee revenue, technically $12 billion of revenue a year. So the Ethereum network, I think of, a good analogy or a good kind of way of thinking about it is the Ethereum network can be thought of as a company. This company is generating $12 billion of revenue. Okay, well, what is that company selling to generate that revenue? It is selling decentralized block space, which is scarce. Like, there's only so many transactions you can fit into a block because the blocks are hard limited by the gas limit. And I mean, you can raise the gas limit over time, but that doesn't happen very often. So that finite resource that everyone wants, how do you kind of like give people priority? Well, you have the fee mechanism where people basically outbid each other to get their kind of transactions in a block, and that leads to the fees going up. Like, it's as simple as that. So why would you be bearish on a company that's making incredible amounts of revenue? And then people will sometimes hit back to me being like, okay, well, maybe this is bullish for ETH as an asset, but it's bearish for Ethereum adoption at the network level. And I mean, I can understand why people I guess get confused here, because this modular blockchain stuff that I obviously have been talking about a lot lately is definitely a new kind of like term for people. But at the same time, it's not like the kind of like I guess things inside modular blockchains like sharding and rollups haven't been around for quite a while now. So the way I explain it is basically that, well, Ethereum layer 1 is a settlement layer. We want Ethereum layer 1 kind of like to be generating as much revenue as possible, to be settling as much value as possible, and then we can basically scale via layer 2, via the rollups, which act as kind of, I guess, a transaction compression mechanism, essentially, where you have user transactions. The layer 2 is paying for the fee revenue on layer 1, and the user's not having to pay that anymore. So these numbers aren't accurate, but just like as an illustrative example here, say that there's like 10,000 transactions that are done on layer 1. Well, each of those transactions are going to cost like, say, $50 each in kind of like fees. That's going to be a lot of fees for 10,000 transactions from 10,000 users. Now, how about you put those 10,000 transactions on a layer 2 from those 10,000 users, you compress them all together, and then you only put one proof and the call data onto layer 1. Well, that's why it becomes considerably cheaper, but that means that Ethereum's block space demand is basically flowing from the users paying for it themselves to the users going to this kind of like layer 2 that pays for it on behalf of them. So it's kind of like a public transportation system is another way to look at it, where when you're riding the train, or you're riding like a bus or whatever, you're still using the same roads, right? You're still using petrol, like, because the bus is using petrol, but the cost is actually shared among all the people kind of riding the bus. So it's considerably cheaper than owning a car and then driving the car, having to pay for the fuel yourself. So it's the same thing with Ethereum, where the layer 2s are kind of like these public transportation systems where the cost is like split, and then we can kind of like fit more people in there and basically take up less space on the layer 1 as users, but the layer 2s just basically fill up that space. And just imagine kind of like a city that was all buses instead of cars. Like literally, it was all buses around the city. You'd be able to pack a lot more people into that, and it would be a lot more density there than just people driving cars around, and it would be net cheaper for everyone. That's exactly what's happening with the layer 1 versus layer 2 dynamic. And the thing is that just because a bus is using the road instead of a car, it doesn't mean that bus is not paying for that road. As I said, right, it's still paying for petrol, or gas. It's still gas, right? It's Ethereum. It's the same kind of like thing there, but it's still paying to use the roads. It's still paying, the taxes are still being paid to manage the roads and all those sorts of things. Registrations are being paid, all that sort of stuff. It's the same thing with these layer 2s acting as buses for Ethereum, where they're still paying Ethereum layer 1, but they're kind of like splitting the cost and kind of like compressing things down. So when I explain that to people and use those analogies, they tend to get it. Depending, some people don't want to see reasons. Some people just like want to see their bags pumped from Ethereum killers and whatever. I'm not interested in educating those people. But generally, once I lay it all out, it makes sense for people who see reason. And I've laid it out so many times on the refill at this point. But I think it's always worth reiterating and kind of like looking at it from a different point of view as well, because I get people are frustrated by the fees, but at the end of the day, I just don't see it as a bearish thing for Ethereum at all. Like at all. I see no angle where this could be bearish. The only angle actually where it could be bearish, or the only reality where it was bearish is if Ethereum didn't have scaling solutions, and Ethereum layer 1 was basically just a whale chain. And eventually, what ends up happening is that the whales are basically the only ones who can do anything, and then all the kind of like new users stop coming in, all the kind of like actual users go away, and it's just the whales left, and the network just loses its value over time. Developers leave. That's kind of like the bearish case, but that's not happening at all. We have more scaling solutions than we've ever had before, and these scaling solutions are getting more use than pretty much all the layer 1s combined, all the other layer 1s combined. And Ethereum is still generating enormous amounts of fee revenue, regardless of people not wanting to pay the fees. It's just an insane amount, and they're being burned. So taking it all together is a kind of really great thing when you look at it from that point of view, I think. And speaking of, I guess, like fee burning and EIP 1559, Trent Van Epps put out kind of like a tweet where he says, still worth repeating that 2.5 months later in that 1559 did not increase gas prices. Unprecedented NFT demand for block space did. It's impossible to prove a counterfactual, but I strongly believe that without 1559, gas prices would have been much higher, especially in the hours after drops. I fully agree with this. As I've talked about this on the refuel before, 1559 did not increase gas prices. There is no evidence to support that. Anyone pushing that narrative is woefully misinformed or trying to, I guess, like purposely mislead people. It's just a coincidence that the NFT demand spiked at the same time that 1559 went live. And to Trent's point here, I also strongly believe that without 1559, gas prices would have actually been much higher than what they are, especially in the hours after NFT drops, right? Where things get really crazy. Like if you've all noticed that, right? Things get really crazy sometimes. They go 1,000, 2,000 Gwei, but they actually come down much, much faster because of the way 1559 acts as a balancing mechanism there, and with its dynamic kind of block size. So, dynamic gas limit, I should say. So from that point of view, I fully agree with Trent here. And for those of you who don't know, Trent has been one of, if not the most involved people in 1559 from both a kind of like ecosystem perspective, but also from community and community perspective, and getting in touch with different kind of like wallet providers and infrastructure providers, getting them on 1559, pushing things like that. So if anyone knows what he's talking about, it's definitely Trent. But I would say that it's not just him saying it. It is definitely a lot of people in the know that aren't trying to spread false narratives saying it as well. So definitely listen to the people who know what they're talking about. All right, Polynya's back on the refuel. I know you guys missed them. So they put out a kind of like tweet, which I really liked, I guess yesterday, where they said, soon we'll be laughing at how we used to get 10,000 plus nodes to all reprocess the same transactions 10,000 times. Ludicrously inefficient and downright stupid. Instead, you could have Darth Vader do it once and everyone has a succinct ZKP or zero knowledge proof with compressed results guaranteeing validity. And they go on to say, it's the Model T moment for the blockchain industry. This is how we go from 10,000 people building 10,000 10,000 cars to the same 10,000 people now specialized in an assembly line building 1 million cars. Monolithic blockchains are obsolete, just like the Model T versus horse-drawn carriages. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Model T was, I don't think it was the first ever car, but I think it was the first ever production car that came from Ford, and it basically came with the production line that all cars are basically built, or the assembly line that cars are built on today, and it basically revolutionized supply chains, and it made things much, much more efficient. That is exactly what is happening with blockchains today, with the modular blockchain revolution, and that's exactly what Polynya is saying here, where basically it's just, it seems like we're in like this very, very manual world right now with these monolithic blockchains, where they're so inefficient, they just do not make sense to do things like this. What they're currently doing with verifying all the same kind of like transactions across all the same nodes, where we could basically move that execution to a layer 2 and as they say here, use kind of like Darth Vader as an example, like the most evil person ever, to do the transactions at layer 2, but still know that they were processed because of a zero knowledge proof, which is absolutely amazing, really. I mean, this technology is, I can't stress enough how insane zero knowledge technology is, and it's not new technology. It's been around for 30 years or more. It's just that the applications are new now. People actually have a reason to use this technology in an in a kind of like a practical sense, rather than just in theory and just in kind of like labs and things like that. So that's why it is such a massive kind of like paradigm shift here. And I've talked about this ad nauseum. I've written about it in my newsletter. I'm not going to go on too much about this, but again, I just love reiterating this fact for you guys, because I want you guys to spread this message. I want you all to be out there spreading the modular blockchain narrative, and I want you to be armed with the right information to do so. And I've seen a few of you doing it already, and like supporting the message, educating people in the Discord channel, and I really, really love that. And that's kind of like why I keep repeating myself a lot of the time. But I don't think you guys are bored of that. I think you guys like seeing me be excited about this sort of stuff for sure. All right, so Bartek put out another great thread on layer 2s today, where he basically spoke about censorship resistance at layer 2 and how they're going to approach it, and kind of like how the approaches will vary. So I suggest reading the thread. It's a short one. There's only 8 tweets in it. But essentially, Bartek believes it's going to be kind of, I guess, the censorship resistance for a layer 2 is going to be one of the key differentiators between them. And I believe so as well, because for those of you who don't know, censorship resistance at layer 2 is actually much weaker than it is at layer 1, because if you only have one kind of like sequencer processing transactions, well, then that one sequencer can censor you. It can basically say, well, I'm not going to process transactions from this address, see you later. You could still process your transactions on layer 1, of course, and you could still get your funds back out of layer 1, but there's no fun in that, right? That's just crappy. Like, you're using a layer 2 because you want to get the benefits of them, and if someone's censoring you, well, that's really shitty. So the way around this, or the way to kind of rectify this issue, is that you decentralize the sequencing, right? You decentralize the validation and sequencing of the layer 2 network, and by doing this, you basically have like a network of nodes that process it all, and then it becomes just much harder for you to be censored, because those nodes would have to collude to censor you, right? Those sequences would have to collude. And that kind of like mirrors what we have on layer 1 today, where if the whole network wanted to censor you, all the miners would have to collude to do that, right? Or at least like a majority of them. So from that perspective, it definitely maps pretty well to layer 1 there. But this, I definitely do believe this is going to be a key differentiator for different layer 2s, and they're going to have different approaches to it. Some of them will try really hard to decentralize sequences out. It has to make sense from an economic standpoint as well, because obviously these sequences have to run hardware to process the transactions. They're going to have running costs, stuff like that. So this is why I say another reason why there's going to be tokens for these L2s, because that definitely makes sense in that context. But they don't have to have tokens, but they will. But then, for staking and stuff like that. And then they're also going to be able to generate fee revenue from the L2s as well, as kind of like payment for processing these transactions. So I think that I wouldn't say any of the L2s are further along in this than any of the others. They all pretty much have centralized sequences right now and centralized operators. But I know for a fact that they're all thinking about this, and they're all trying to kind of like decentralize the sequences out over time. But it's just not a priority right now. The priority is getting this stuff out there, upgrading it, getting users, getting network effect. Then you can worry about decentralizing it out. And, sometimes the L1s will make these arguments as well. They say, oh, we can start totally centralized and we'll just decentralize over time. No. This is totally different. L2 decentralization is very different to L1 because L2s are not doing consensus on transactions still. They are just processing them and executing them. The consensus still happens at layer 1 Ethereum where where layer 1 Ethereum nodes or validators and miners or validators come to consensus on the proofs that are posted to layer 1. So it's very, very different. L2s have a much easier path to decentralizing than L1s do, at least from a kind of a technical standpoint. Social standpoint, it's a different thing altogether. But I would still argue that L2s probably have a better chance at decentralizing over L1s there. All right, so ETHGlobal's ETHOnline finalists are now live. So there's 17 finalists here. I was a judge last week at this. It was really awesome to kind of judge all the projects in there. A lot of great projects coming out of ETHOnline as usual. I mean, these ETHGlobal kind of hackathons produce some amazing projects. Definitely check out this thread. It's a link in the YouTube description. I'm not going to go through it all. I just wanted to highlight the thread, and I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to kind of leave it at that there. zkSync posted an update on UniSync. So UniSync was that Uniswap kind of like port that they did where they ported it to their zk EVM, zk rollup network. Since launching late last week, they've already processed over 590,000 transactions, but they did not expect this for their testnet. So their force set apparently was not designed to handle such load and is having issues. They will be looking into this tomorrow, which I guess is today maybe, or tomorrow the 19th or something like that, which is cool. Now, is this organic usage? Probably not. It's probably people farming the airdrop because it's so kind of cheap to do so. It's literally, I think, free to do so or near free to do so. Yeah, it's not free. I think it was like 10 cents or something like that. But I would wager that there's a lot of people just trying to farm the airdrop, right, of a zkSync token, because zkSync have already announced that they're going to be doing a token. So people are like, well, I better farm it. Maybe they're farming it on multiple addresses, stuff like that. I don't know what their airdrop's going to look like, of course. We'll have to see, but still, great to see people just using it to begin with. I'd be curious to see how many of these people would, how many of these were unique people rather than just like, people using different addresses to kind of farm an airdrop. But it's kind of really hard to tell, right, at the end of the day. All right, finally, just wanted to give a quick shout out to this project that I'm actually involved in as an advisor called MathBlocks. The reason I joined it, and it's an NFT project basically, they're producing math-themed NFTs and generative art. The reason why I joined on as an advisor is because they're doing a lot of stuff around public goods funding with this. They basically want to be able to raise money, or I guess like sell NFTs and use that money to fund like STEM education, so science, technology, engineering, and math education, math content creators and online communities. I am a really, really big proponent of anything that does public goods funding. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of Gitcoin. I always talk about them. I do a lot of funding there, and I have grants on there for the Daily Gwei and ETHHub. But I want that to go beyond Gitcoin. I want public goods funding to go beyond. We have Optimism obviously doing it as well, but I wanted to go further than that. I wanted to start kind of like touching communities that we haven't kind of like served before, and that's exactly what MathBlocks is doing with kind of like their math themed NFTs and generative art. So if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely do so. You can read this thread to learn more about them. You can join the Discord channel as well. It's very active in there. But yeah, just like obviously a disclaimer there, I'm a kind of advisor to this project because I want to help get attention on it, and I want to help them do what they want to do, which is essentially fund all this education. And obviously I'm a big proponent of education as well. So yeah, I was really excited to kind of like be given the opportunity here to kind of get involved with this. But I think on that note, I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.